Daniel Kinahan, as you can imagine, is right across the papers, front pages and back. Been extraordinary few days, really, post that press conference at Dublin City Hall. Do you want to get the ball rolling on any piece which caught your eye, Bernard?
On Kinahan?
Yeah.
They're
all of a similar vein, really, I would say.
Yeah, they're all a similar vein. Michael Foley in the Times, but yeah, it's across. Every paper has a piece on it, and I think what hit home to me or this week was obviously the press conference for the Fury Whyte fight, and obviously 17 journalists asked about 40 questions of Fury and Whyte, but Kinahan wasn't mentioned once, and obviously had been well briefed or well streamed in advance to make sure that there was no unfriendly questions. But yeah, just it's phenomenal the influence he's had in boxing. There's the front page of Sun Independent says he's been investing in rugby. When you drill down into it, it's a sponsorship of a club in Spain. But boxing has seemed to mean where most of the sports washing has happened, and it's going to be interesting, obviously, as the pressure mounts on Kinahan and his syndicates. Whether there's anyone else, I suppose, to step up and put this type of money into boxing. It seems to be very much built on a foundation of sand. Obviously, there's still huge demand. 95,000 people in Wembley. It's not that it's not a popular sport, but how much of it actually has been built on his investments.
Of this press conference during the week, Sarah, 17 journalists, writes Mick Foley, asked about 40 questions of Fury and Whyte. Kinahan was not mentioned once. After the press conference, the top-rank reporter Christina Poncher, who hosted the event, told the Times that another top-rank representative on the call had decided who was permitted to ask questions. If anyone seriously thinks this story can be suffocated by silence, the actions of the US government alone have already ensured that it will not. And several pieces talk about Bob Arum, for instance, making a fairly dramatic U-turn. So Mark Gallagher here in the Mail on Sunday says it's clear now that Arum realised what a miscalculation it was to defend Kinahan. And he has a quote, "We are not going to deal with Daniel," Arum told Sportsmail on Tuesday. "We respect the sanctions. We will deal directly with Tyson and his lawyer. I wasn't pleased with a number of things he was doing in boxing. I was looking to sever ties anyway." And then he spoke to Yahoo later in the week, and he accused Kinahan of using bullying tactics. So there's a real about turn on the part of Bob Arum. And Mark Gallagher notes, aside from a few brave souls such as Barry McGuigan and Billy Walsh, there were few in boxing who were willing to put their head above a parapet. Which I'm sure you can understand to an extent, Sarah.
I can't imagine that I would go into my job on Kieran Cunningham being a person that I know and that I know has been, stringent in terms of his pursuit of honesty and truth and fairness in relation to this story. He has a family and he has a daily life, and he's come through this knowing that he was potentially going to be intimidated, on the street, by people who don't want these bad these stories to come out about Kinahan. And it's a very tough place to be when you're looking for truth and honesty in journalism, and there's a lot of pressure coming from people that you don't know or understand how dangerous they are.
Eamon Sweeney's writing about it on the back page as well, and he talks of the likes of Paddy Barnes and Michael Conlan and Carl Frampton, and he writes there's a certain reluctance to look at the implications of Barnes, Conlan and Frampton's MTK links. It's easy to rail against foreign promoters and the money men at media companies for apparently getting into bed with Kinahan. Criticising 3 Irish sporting heroes for doing so is a different matter. This leads to the pretense that certain stars can still be ranked among the good guys despite cozying up to Kinahan. It's a comforting delusion, but a dishonest one. Those involved with MTK and its associates knew what they were doing and who they were involved with. They are not children. They took the decision to go with MTK because they thought it made good business sense. Money talked. And certainly I know, like, for instance, Michael Conlan no longer with MTK and has gone out on his own, but there's a real sense, Bernard, that has hung over these boxers, and certainly post the media ban in the Republic, really, the coverage of their fights has been close to non-existent. Yeah,
it has in the South, in the Republic, but as I said, worldwide it still seems boxing is thriving, so when we're a tiny market, so it's as I said, it seems to be across the world. He's got his fingerprints in nearly every major boxing warehouse or boxing club that have professional players and being able to be very much the puppet master controlling fights. But where does it end?
It's interesting. The English papers are certainly have their eyes have been opened to a large extent over the last 12 months to 18 months, and Donald McRae very much is, by way of building up to what is a big fight at Wembley and English fighters, he's absolutely taken the Kinahan line and discussing the lack of questioning in the press conference as opposed to avoiding the subject.
Yeah, he was very, very strong on it. I thought his piece was excellent. As you said, it's across all the papers. But I think I admire the journalists now who are really asking questions and aren't afraid to spit in the soup as such, because I mean that Don McRae is most of the journalism I read around him is about boxing, but he's challenging those that effectively he would be relying upon for interviews or access in the future, and that's certainly not easy. So I think credit to him and all the other journalists who've been very strong on it.